Hello, everyone. This is podcast number 4. Today, we want to talk about two very needed topics. Amidst the pandemic, more than everyone, people need to have hope. In fact, they need to know that despite all the striving that we're going to be going through, and always have, by the way, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, guaranteed. The striving always tends to bring on new things. It forces about, it kicks us in the derriere, it kicks us in the butt, and causes us to find and to work toward a better, brighter future.
It's easy to look at the state of the world and just start panicking or become depressed and to conclude that there's no hope for the future. But you can also use it as a fuel to any of you who've been through some hard time will know this from personal experience, that as easy as it is to sink into crap, at the same time, a hard, painful situation can serve as the best fuel to kick you into action and actually turn your life around. And the same thing applies to the world as a whole. It's terrible what's happening, and it'd be ideal if it wasn't happening, but we have to face up and accept the fact that it is anyway, and make the best of it.
Yeah, you know,
hold on. In some ways, it means that ultimately, it is really better to be an optimist and wrong than a pessimist and right. Because the reason why isn't because it matters for you personally. If you're a pessimist and right, you're just going to be more pessimistic and you're going to feel worse. Your state of mind is entirely self-created. And if you're pessimistic and right, then you become more pessimistic and more bitter, and eventually turn either anxious or depressed.
If you're
an optimist and wrong, but you're an optimist, then it means if you're, by definition, if you insist on being optimistic, even if you're wrong so much, you maintain a positive attitude at all times. That this isn't some kind of etherical mumbo jumbo. It's a matter of mental state, mental health here.
Happiness is a state of mind.
And if you are optimistic, and now it's not a matter of being rose-colored glasses. It's not saying to go and look at this world situation and just say, it'll work out somehow. It'll work out if we make it work out.
If we pay attention to what's taking place, and then do things in a positive light that benefits everyone, then you are working toward a better future. You're participating, you're taking an active role in your future. And if you help your neighbor, so to speak, have a better future, then collectively, both of you, all of us, will have a better future, because we're looking out, watching our six. We're watching each other's backs. And in turn, eventually, you have something better.
And you could term this being pragmatically optimistic. You look at the world situation pragmatically at it as it is, without any filters. Not cynically, not with rose-colored glasses. And then you work toward an optimistic future. So pragmatically optimistic futurist, perhaps. That's really the state we should all strive to be in, because that's the state where you get the most done and have the best mental health.
Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to touch on here, and that is everyone on earth is born, it comes into the world with a desire to achieve something, which is based on a whole host of things. And we're not going to get into what it's based on. But as we grow up, we get programmed, or circumstances, well, all circumstances can program you negatively if you allow them to. And of course, as you're a small child, you don't have any choice. You don't know any better. But eventually, as everyday life takes place, it begins to erode what it is that we desire, our dreams. Well, having a positive attitude, you don't accept what's wrong, but at the same time, always know that everything that's happening ultimately serves to better.
Well, hold on a minute there. It serves to better if we make it do that.
Of course.
So it's not to be blindly optimistic and then disappointed and disheartened when your optimistic viewpoint turns out false. It's to accept the world situation, accept reality as it is, without any filters, without any cynical filters, and without any optimistic filters, just to accept it as it is, and then work toward something better.
Exactly.
Then you're always working to make things better. Even if things are already good, you're working to make them even better.
We need to look it directly into the eye and know that at the end of the day, we can strive for something better.
And if you think you can do nothing, you can still do something about yourself.
That's
you
right.
Can still make you can still make yourself a better person and make yourself a healthier person, a more positive person, a nicer person.
And then when you go to the store and you meet
that creates a knock-on effect.
Exactly.
And there you go. You've gone from not being able to do anything to now you're helping who knows how many people. It may seem small, but if a whole bunch of people do that, it adds up.
You imagine going to the store and each and every person is taking a positive attitude towards things. Sure, they identify there are things wrong and they're striving to work to do things better. But if everyone had a positive attitude, what would you think when you went into that environment? Let's say everybody at the supermarket had a positive attitude. Well, it would be infectious, would it not? Wouldn't that help every day? Of course it would. And this is in part what we're talking about. The everyday humdrum, the humdrum of every day need not get in the way and alter your happiness or your dreams. It should not prevent you from pursuing what it is you want to pursue. Look at us. We're a good example. We're no different. We have experienced ups and downs just like everybody else, and I'm sure it's not over. But we have not give up. We're never going to give up. And you should have the same attitude. I have the attitude that I'm like a cornered dog. If I need to, there I am. I'm going to continue just as I started. And likewise, you need to have the same attitude, the same philosophy. It's good for you. You need to. Otherwise, the negative is going to pursue you. It's going to eat at you. It's going to get in the way of your rational thinking. It's going to emotionalize you. And then along come circumstances. Now those circumstances can control you. It's called divide and conquer. So, I think...
And
go ahead.
The same thing applies to technologies, because it's easy to go and say, oh, I don't think anything will ever happen, or, oh, this is impossible. But we also make absolutely no progress that way.
Well, we have to look at the positive side of it. What is it that we want to do?
Well, yeah, we actually need to not say something's impossible, but say, well, gee, it looks impossible right now, but let's look at this and just be crazy for a moment and see can we do this anyway? Can we do something that looks like anti-gravity? Can we go fast in light? It looks impossible, but let's try anyway. That is how science progresses. That's how technology progresses.
I like taking what looks like the impossible and saying, how might I make this work? And that's what science fiction writers strive for. And look at the books that have been written that are so popular. Everybody wants it.
Yes, of course, it's a fine line that you don't want to delude yourself into thinking just about anything is possible, because down that road lies absolutely getting nothing done either. That's where you have to balance. You have to balance between, and you have to find the balance yourself. There's no real way to find it. Of what technologies are. Well, actually, the approach is simply to look at everything logically and logically think it through and think. So, for example, fast light travel. Everyone says it's impossible because causality violation, cause and effect are messed up. But if you logically think it through, there are enough reasons and examples of why it actually must be possible. If for the universe to make logical sense, you need to have that kind of symmetry. And certain things that what we call quantum phenomena are unexplainable and left to just simply be unexplained mysteries that is just sort of glossed over, unless you accept that fast light motion and travel is a thing that's possible. And if you logically analyze it, if you go back in time, apparently mess up cause and effect, it just means that's the way things already were. There's no paradox except from a certain point of view. You change point of view, nothing's none of that is paradox. And if you also logically think it through, if it was that easy to mess with timeline, so yes, it means that there's something that prevents direct time meddling, and there's already some evidence as to what. Is that just like how two particles can't be forced into the same space at the same time, so too does that apply with time. Is that you try to go back in time or forward in time and reintegrate with the timeline, you get repelled. So it's just a matter of logically thinking it through. And even if there's scary consequences that, well, gee, in the far, far, far future, we might actually be able to overcome that and enter the timeline and change the time anyway, that means that, well, our descendants may already have done that. And that might seem scary, but we have to, again, face reality as it is, whether we like it or not. And also means, yes, there's technologies that have been developed and will be developed that are quite dangerous. That doesn't mean we shouldn't develop them. In many cases, we need them. We should, or practically all cases, but we need to be cognitive of the danger and responsible.
Yeah, it isn't that we should avoid the technology because it's dangerous. If that's the case,
we should develop and use.
Get rid of your knives, forks. Those are dangerous too. But we're cognitive of them.
We need to develop the technologies, develop and use the technologies responsibly.
Yes.
Or are we just a planet of children here that can't be trusted with their own devices?
Which is nonsense. If you look, what would the world be like today if we didn't have the assistance of nuclear power plants? Yeah, they're dangerous. They're polluting and so on and so forth.
They're not polluting exactly, but no, unless they fail.
Sorry, I'm thinking of radioactivity as polluting the environment, but I didn't want to focus on that. The point that I'm making is that it's been used for war, and so will other things. But at the end of the day, it is a process we go through. Technology helps to serve it. Technology serves to advance our consciousness.
Here's two considerations. If we never develop nuclear power, then we would be forever barred to this solar system alone, because it's through nuclear power of some sort or technology developed from that we will be able to leave the system.
Well, what about here on Earth? Too.
No chemical means of propulsion or anything, or solar carries enough energy density to actually leave the system.
Right.
And secondly, we would never be able to develop fusion without first developing fission. One comes before the other. Fission's there's no other way around it. And we would never be able to develop antimatter or have discovered antimatter. It's all related. You can't have one without the other.
That's right.
So it's just a matter, or genetic engineering. Using genetic engineering, we could solve the problem with growing meat. We still need meat for health. There's proteins in it that you need.
Wouldn't it be nice not to have to kill animals for it?
Yeah.
Rather, we could grow it?
With genetic engineering, we can increase crop yields. We could grow meat in a tank. We could also heal practically any injury, live for hundreds or even thousands of years. Yes, they can be abused horribly, but that's not a reason not to develop. It's a reason to develop it responsibly. And on that note, I think we should get on to the other half of the video.
Yes, the craft.
Yes.
You guys are going to love this as well.
Let's just hit him between the eyes with it right here.
Okay.
We're working to we're working on we're working towards a single stage to orbit space plane, and the technologies involved are not far future. They're actually quite old. They just haven't been put together yet. But not to focus on that.
Right.
But the technology is called magnetohydrodynamics. Normally, when you want to move through the air, you're limited to only interacting a short distance away from the surface of the vehicle or its airfoil or some mass of atoms. And this limits you in that you can't really do anything with the air until it hits you, resulting in things like sonic booms, and which use up energy so that it's harder to move faster, causes heating and shockwaves that damage the vehicle and are potentially harmful to the environment. And we're forced to expend massive amounts of energy and burn lots of fuel to go fast. And in a case of rocket, have to burn huge amounts of propellant to go anywhere. MHD, instead, what it is, the word magnetohydrodynamics means, just like hydrodynamics means some kind of dynamic involving a liquid or a fluid. It's kind of often used to also mean fluid dynamics. Even if it's technically inaccurate, it's often used that way. Magnetohydrodynamics means to interact with a fluid or a liquid using magnetic fields or electromagnetic fields. Specifically, something called the Lorentz force, which is a force it's basically the main of how magnetic fields interact. You put two wires together, run current through them, and they attract together. You put a magnet over a piece of metal, and it pulls it in. Those are Lorentz forces being created in there. Now, in the case of a magnet, normally it's attracting, but you oscillate a magnetic field, and especially put an electric field at right angles to it and oscillate that to create an oscillating current, and you have a repulsive force instead that can be used to push and pull and move around anything conductive. And you can use this if you take lasers, which there was a Japanese team who developed managed to make mid-air holograms using lasers, creating little tiny balls of plasma that formed floating pixels. It was quite loud, though, and ionized the air strongly. So while that's a problem for holograms that needs to be overcome, for a craft, the ionization part is actually quite nice. It means that rather than have to create huge arcs, you could just have some mild lasers zapping the air around the craft. And if that sounds dangerous, so too is standing behind a jet engine. And just like any kind of energetic propulsion, you don't want to stand next to it while it's running necessarily.
You don't want to be holding a propeller under a boat either.
But actually, it's a little safer because you can control where the lasers go, and you could technically even allow someone to walk up, and as long as they were detected, park the lasers around them so they can walk up to the craft unharmed, get in while it's running.
And that's all doable with the technology that we have today.
The Japanese did that actually about 5 years ago or more.
Right.
And so the technology isn't new.
MHD is not new.
MHD was first developed back in the 1920s, actually, with some experiments, I think, if I recall correctly, before that. So the lasers can be used to ionize the air, and in fact, if the lasers are pulsed rapidly enough, they don't even produce much of a visible glow anymore and begin to get quieter. So you could, at the cost of it'd still be a loud buzz, but there might be ways around that. And with not much in the way of any visible glow, you could ionize the air, and then you have on the surface of your craft electrodes and wires, which can be covered in some material, that will go and reach through the craft surface to grab hold of the now conductive air and move it. Using this, you can eliminate any sonic boom from a shockwave. You can move the air even though the craft is stationary and create a static wing rather than having to move the wing through the air by either spinning it or going at high speed. You can move the air over the wing. Same result, it lifts. And because it's actively being controlled, the thing's rock steady in the air as if it's sitting on the ground.
Yeah, not even a storm will affect it.
So picture, and now as the shape of the craft, it can be applied to nearly any shape. A disc actually provides the best lifting surface, but for a shuttle to orbit, perhaps something more conventional would be good, at least to start with. So imagine this: you have a craft, shuttle, a space plane, sitting on the runway, and it goes. Let's say it still has jet engines. In fact, MHD can be used to make a better kind of jet engine that can work all the way up to nearly orbital velocities while it's still in the atmosphere.
And that has already been tested.
There's a Russian company that actually already prototyped that technology back in the late 80s, early 90s. Of course, the Soviet Union was collapsed at the time, so they didn't get the funds to do anything. And no one's been bothered to pick it up, just like how no one's picked up rockets. But again, not to focus on that. So imagine this. You have the space plane sitting on the runway. It suddenly starts humming. You still see no glow. It just starts humming. And then what happens? Its landing gears retract, and the craft just stays where it was, as if the landing gear is still there. Landing gear retract, and the space plane lifts up, still humming. Hum increases in volume a little bit. It lifts up and then starts just gliding down the runway, picking up speed, and then starts moving up as if it's on a computer game, and you're just moving it around until you say, "Oh no, realistic! It's being rendered. Your render is not very realistic looking there," and the space plane will move that way. And so it keeps that up, picks up more and more speed. And now its wings start functioning, but better than normal because you can control the airflow more precisely.
And faster.
So it goes faster and faster. It experiences no sonic boom, no shockwave heating, because it's actually, rather than the air piling up in front as it runs into the craft, instead it can just shuck it along and suck it in and push it out the back. And, no sonic boom, no shockwave, no piling up anymore. And it just, no louder than that buzz, zips through the air, increasing speed all the way up until it reaches orbital velocity and it's still in the atmosphere. And because it's MHD, it can actually reach the lasers out over, as it gets higher and higher, it can reach the lasers out over a larger and larger area to make up for the thinning air. So it can operate all the way up to what they call the edge of space. At that point now, it throws itself up into a very long hop, that will suborbital hop, at which point it only needs a relatively small amount of onboard propellant to circularize its orbit and put itself in a permanent stable orbit. And voila, it's in space. Just think about this. Space is a lot closer than you might think. Just a mere 200 kilometers straight up, or 100 miles. That's it. 200 kilometers straight up. That's less than the width of many countries. It's just that straight up.
100 miles in one direction is not very far.
The difficulty in getting to space isn't the distance. It's not very great of a distance. The difficulty is speed. Normally the air gets in the way, but with MHD, the air becomes your tool. Now with that, you can throw yourself up to that speed and then just use a little bit of extra fuel to smooth it out so that you stay up there. And now you're in orbit, just like that. It would take no more than, 20, 30 minutes?
Tops. And if you can go, the faster you can go, the quicker.
And there's no big booster.
That's right.
And now I mentioned that you can make a better combustion engine. You can make one that's less polluting. You could take, for example, rather than needing to burn complex hydrocarbons that produce not just simply CO2 and nitrous oxide, but also all kinds of nasty other byproducts, you can use the ionized air to actually do something they call electrothermal combustion. I'm not going to go into the details, but suffice to say it's not fully combustion anymore. It's partly drawing from the ambient charge of the atmosphere itself. Kind of like ball lightning, which is something that they actually prove does exist and have studied recently. And using this phenomena, it can actually draw in extra energy and achieve a much more energetic and also cleaner exhaust. So even when it still does have to pollute a bit, at least for now, it's not as bad. In fact, it'd be less polluting than most aircraft, even though it's a spacecraft. Suddenly now, space would become almost easier to get to than it is to fly across continents. And as for the ozone that the ionization would produce, you can rectify that using electron beams and also lasers to coax the air back into being deionized. That will produce a faint glow, but during the daytime you probably won't see it. But at night, the craft would strangely look like it's lit up from behind you. At any direction you look at it, it will look like the craft is lit up from behind you. You turn around, there's no light there. Whereas, because the air itself is glowing, and the net result is that it's actually hard to see the air glowing unless it's a very sharp difference, like not glowing to suddenly glowing, but this would be gradual. And so it would just look like the ship was illuminated from itself, like as if it was hot or something. It would be quite strange. And you can also eliminate the sound, the noise it would produce by using, because if you're manipulating the air like this, moving it around, you can change its density, you can change the speed of sound and actually cause an effect where you can diffuse the sound to nullify it out. So the craft would just hover silently. It's like anti-gravity. Many people would probably call it such. You can call it anti-gravity in the fact that it acts against gravity.
Like but it's a ladder.
Yes. But it's not repulsive gravity. So therefore not true anti-gravity, but it would act a bit like it. Obviously it won't work on an airless planet, but still. And that's not even including any further developments like the fusion or antimatter power that we've talked about before.
Or that the video that we're about to publish, which is being delayed because we have a lot happening and a lot is happening, but nonetheless, it's coming for sure. We're still working on it, and it is close, very close. And so this craft that we're talking about is near term. It can be built today. It's not something that we need to sit down and engineer and try to figure out how to do this. We already know how to do it. Principles of it have already been proven on scaled tests. Manipulating the atmosphere to do things has already been proven. NASA has done something.
It's just a matter of, well, collecting together the resources necessary to actually build this,
and having the will to do so.
Oh, and here's something I forgot to mention: the MHD can be used not just simply to lift the craft directly, but also to reduce its effective weight. Not mass, but weight. How much make it as if it's buoyant. And therefore, it can very easily, with wings that look far too small, lift itself. Even if it's loaded down with a lot of stuff, it can effectively reduce the weight.
Now, we're not going to explain that process right now, because that's a much longer topic.
I'm talking about the MHD. It can use
the
MHD to not only lift itself directly, but to save energy. It can actually use MHD just simply to reduce the effective weight, to lift itself up, not enough to become airborne, but at least so it's like it's full of helium gas or something now.
Yeah, like a hot air balloon or a helium balloon, yes.
And so it become quite easy to lift itself into the air. And suddenly space is next door now, with all that means.
So I want to keep emphasizing on the fact that this is a doable technology, and people need hope. They need to understand that things have always gone wrong in the world, and I said this last time, we're still here, and we're more advanced than ever before.
Because
we don't give up.
And others in the past, just like us now, others in the past have had the attitude of they're not going to give up. No matter how hard it gets. And the result is that we're still here. The planet's been through at least one to maybe two or three global collapses of civilization, and yet we're still here and more advanced than we ever have been.
Which means that those pioneers before us didn't give up. We should thank them. We should be thanking them for that purpose. But can you think, for those of you in the U.S., you're familiar with the Great Migration across the plains to the other side, to the West Coast. Can you imagine if those pioneers gave up and said, it's too difficult?
Well, here's another example. The Polynesians went and scouted out and colonized practically the entire Pacific.
Oh, yeah.
All the way from, in fact,
that's amazing.
There's new evidence that shows they made it to the coast of North and South America, where they got the sweet potato, which is being a staple crop in Polynesia, in the Pacific, thousands of miles away from its native habitat in the Andes, since long before the Europeans ever showed up there. So imagine if their ancestors had said, too hard. Well, they never would have gone and colonized the whole Pacific.
You know, we were talking the other day, and that is, over my course of the years, I've always done something almost exotic, getting up and moving cold turkey to a new place that I've never stepped foot in before. You know, when I get into a rut of everyday routine, I call it a rut. When I get into an everyday routine, I look at it as a rut. I begin to feel uncomfortable about the future because I know I'm not moving forward. Life is to be learned and to grow from life, one step at a time. But if we add a spice of life, how much better would your life be? Well, stepping out and taking on this project is a huge, massive undertaking that takes one out of their comfort zone every day. I'm talking
quite far.
And and on an everyday basis, I'm talking to more and more people, which each and every person has their own unique personality, way of looking at things. Sure, some of them are kind of similar, but for the most part, people come in with all manner of ideas, thoughts, and concepts and feelings. That's a challenge. I love it. I love the challenge. Trying to figure out how to convey things in that person's way of understanding I love it. It's fantastic. But
now, speaking of hope,
yeah,
in about 20 minutes, SpaceX should be launching their second manned mission. And for those of you, I want to say something. We don't view SpaceX as the beginning of corporate domination of the planet. Rather, we view the commercialization of space as a way for it to sort of power itself. It's no longer dependent on the whims of whether or not it's politically convenient or necessary. Instead, it can fund and power itself so we can actually go into space and stay there. Because think about it. Name something that stuck on for a long time that wasn't, well, commercial in some manner. And it's just something we have to accept right now that, well, if it's commercial, it'll stay.
Yeah. And so what if certain things have to be commercial? So what if it's a huge, massive challenge? Because that huge, massive challenge is one heck of an experience. And going along that avenue and experiencing that is one heck of a spark of life. It gives us hope. It gives us the promise of being around tomorrow. We are the pioneers, the ones when I say we, those of us, those of you who are listening right now and want to be involved with something, whether it's with us or something else that betters the future, you are a pioneer. And that's going to give you hope. By taking action, by being proactive, you're going to have more hope and know that it's going to happen because you're taking your time. You're looking at what needs to be done. You're not sitting there saying, that's impossible. It can't be done because my physics teacher told me it can't be done. Well, there's a lot of wonderful physics teachers out there that say, hey, take what I've just told you, throw it out the door, kind of, and see if you can do better. I dare you. Okay, so we need to go into space. In fact, it's critical to our future survival, just as all the other technologies that have proven that we are here today. Like we talked about a minute ago, a lot of civilization has collapsed. Nations have risen and fallen. So what? We are still here, and the point is eventually, if we keep at it, we will eventually get it right. And eventually we won't have to have these collapses that happen every so many years. Space is our next frontier, and by golly, we're going to get there, and we're going to stay there. So, what about you? What do you want to do? What is your desires? What is your hopes? What is your dreams? And nobody comes into this world wanting to do harm to others. That's eventually programmed into you. So forget those things. Don't think about anybody else. I don't want you to think about. I want you to think about you right now. What do you want to do? What is your desires? What is your hopes? What is your dreams? Actually, I would like you to put them in the comments. Let's talk about it. As you guys know, we do talk. What's that?
Incoming.
Yeah. Good. Let's talk about it. Are you frightened about what's happening right now in the world? Is the pandemic scaring you? Is all the problems?
Is the threat of war scaring you?
Is the threat of war looming over your head scaring you? Are you concerned nuclear whistles are going to land on your head? Whistles like in Star Trek. What about you in Europe and other places in the world? Are you concerned about the immigration into your country? Well, I don't want to discuss those topics, but I want to know what your concerns are. Because, well, maybe we can help you. By working together, we help each other. And if I can't help you, maybe somebody in the comments will pitch in and say something of encouragement, or offering you a different point of view, or maybe who knows. The point is, I don't have to know exactly what it is that you need, but what I do need to know is you need to be involved. You do need to say something. If you stay at home and keep it in your own head, you're going to go crazy. It's going to affect you adversely, and you're going to lose touch with yourself, with your dreams. You're going to lose touch with reality if it takes you too far in that direction of negativity. We don't want that. You don't want that. Let's bring back the hope, the dream. You know, Trump said, let's make America great. How about let's make the world great? And in turn, all nations will be great, huh? How about that one?
Not to get political here.
Yeah, no, of course not. We're not, as you know, we don't talk about, I was just using this as a statement. We don't talk about politics. No. Because what's that have to do with science? They don't know anything about science anyway. Right?
So
that's my opinion.
How should we wrap this up then?
Yes, because SpaceX is about to launch 4 more astronauts into space. It's very exciting to see. That
15 minutes, I think.
15 minutes? Yeah.
14 now.
Yes, it is. And it's very exciting to see someone come along out of that is not part of the status quo and say, hey, look, this is actually doable. Those who keep telling me that it can't be done, well, guess what? I did it. And now I'm sending 4 astronauts into space. That's probably what Elon is saying right now. Anyway, on that note, as we say, keep wondering about space. Thank you.
See you next time.
See you next time.